Welcome to Learning Unlocked. I am your host, Brit Bingold. As an instructional specialist in Gilbert, Arizona, I am a total nerd when it comes to classroom strategies and educational pedagogy. Educators are the key holders to unlocking learning for students. Today, as always, my goal is to provide you with resources and tools, the keys, to enable and accelerate learning for all students. Thanks for joining me today. Let's get started. Before we get going on the interview today, I just wanted to do a quick reminder that if you have time to rate us and write us a review on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate it. The more reviews and ratings we get, the more educators will see our podcast. So if you like what you're hearing and you think others would too, please head over and provide us a review. Thanks. Hey key holders, welcome to the last episode of season 2 of Learning Unlocked, episode 22. I am so excited for you guys to get to listen to this episode today. I had a really hard time trying to figure out where I wanted to go with the end of season 2 because this season has really been through that pandemic teaching season, and I keep hearing the words learning loss over and over again in the media. And so my guest today, Melissa Hosten, who is someone I have such respect for in the educational field, but also just know just through the different conferences we've had. We've also have some teacher friends in common. I knew she had done some research on learning loss because she spoke at a conference about this. And so I reached out to her and she said she was more than happy to discuss the research with me on the podcast and debunk it. And so I am just hoping today brings you just a little time to breathe, a time to feel like you are appreciated as an educator, no matter if you're an administrator or a teacher in the classroom, but also to gear you up for next school year. I hope that those things happen in today's episode. So my guest today is Melissa Hosten, and she has worked in education for more than 24 years. Like I said, I just have so much respect for her. She is currently a co-director at the University of Arizona Center for Recruitment and Retention of Mathematics Teachers. She also works across Arizona in different schools, as well as the secondary math specialist for the ADE. She also is the math and standards coordinator for Makisa. So she is all over the place with what she does for our state as an educator. She also has been a grant director for grants now totaling over $2 million. She specializes in areas of equity and access, and she's an active member in Arizona Math Leaders and the Arizona Association of Teachers of Mathematics. She recently was awarded the Copper Apple Award for Leadership in Mathematics and Team Excellence Award for service to the Arizona education community. Like I said, she is amazing, and the research she brings today about learning loss is also amazing, and so I just can't wait for you guys to listen. Here's my interview with Melissa. Hi, Melissa. How are you doing?
Hi, Britt. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I can't believe the countdown is 9 days until our school is out in our district. It's scaring me a little bit because I feel like I have way more to do than I have time to do.
I absolutely feel the same way. I can't believe how fast the summer has approached, and I'm just trying to get everything ducks in a row.
Yeah, me too. I'm trying to get everything organized and put together so that I can walk away and relax and take a couple, even just 2 weeks to not even think about teaching. If my mind goes there, I'm just going to be like, nope, and I'm going to just think about something else because I really, really just want to take a break for sure. And I think a lot of teachers are in that same boat where they just need some recovery time just to be a person and a human and not think about teaching for a little bit. So, we're here today to talk about this whole myth of learning loss. And I really am excited to have you on as our season finale for season 2 because the media and social media has been like the learning loss of the kids this year is going to be huge and it's going to impact their next year. And I think there's a lot surrounding that this just is untrue and unfair to our teachers and to our educators. And you did some research behind this recently, right?
I did. I've done a significant amount of research on this.
Yeah, so I am so happy to have you on today because I think what's going to happen is our listeners are going to be like, whew, and they're going to be able to breathe and take that time that they need to recover themselves so that they are refreshed for the next school year. Okay, so let's just start. I always love to start this way. Can you just tell me the story of how you became an educator? Everyone's journey is so different, and so I like to just hear from different people. How did you end up being where you're at right now?
You know, I did not consider becoming a teacher initially. I'm the daughter of a teacher, a fabulous elementary school teacher. Um, but I was headed to medical school. I had already been accepted, and over the summer, my husband was hospitalized with a really serious illness, and I knew that he'd be in the hospital for at least 2 more months. So I felt like it was a bad idea to jump into a lot of medical school debt right at the end of that hospitalization. And my sister said, why don't you defer your enrollment and teach at a charter school as a math teacher? They always need math teachers. And so I took her advice and I was hired as a high school math and science teacher. Within 2 months, I had completely fallen in love with teaching and serving in low income communities. And I have never looked back since.
I love that. I love that story. I mean, it's so funny. One of our other instructional specialists, Julia Celsi, also wanted to go into medicine at first, and it just steered her way to education because she just loved. She figured out in her study groups and things that she loved teaching other people. And I think it really is something that is a passion. And if it's a passion for you on the daily, it does help kind of get through these hard times that we have been having in education this year. Okay, that's awesome. Thank you for telling me that story. So, this focus on learning loss, let's circle back to that. We've seen it in the media across the nation. And of course, with any large scale disruption like a pandemic, this is bound to be the case. But your research has shown quite the opposite. So, can you just take a moment and share with us the term of learning loss and what that actually means and what your data has uncovered about this fear that seems to be kind of popular right now in the news?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, Brittany. I actually can't define learning loss for you because it hasn't been defined.
Right?
In fact, it hasn't even been quantified.
That's crazy.
Yeah, learning loss was coined by an assessment company. And you can imagine that there's a significant benefit to assessment companies if this idea of learning loss was true.
Right.
However, the three major assessment companies have all shown exactly the same results. What they've shown is that the curriculum has, in fact, narrowed in mathematics. We've focused in on the super important areas in each grade level, and we've deepened in those areas, but we haven't actually lost any learning. In fact, they can only show positive learning has happened.
That's interesting too because as teachers are thinking, after they recover from this year and they start to reimagine the next year, they can take away with, hey, I can narrow some things and deepen some things, and my kids are still going to be successful. And that's going to leave some more room, I think, for human connection and the SEL portion that we need, I think, going into next year as well. So that's really like a positive.
I absolutely think it's going to be important for teachers to continue this next normal and continue that idea of narrowing and deepening. Students are going to be able to relate it to their lives, and
Yeah,
it's going to be more meaningful to them.
for sure. Okay. What else did they find out?
Well, yeah, so the Bellwether Institute and the media have been talking a lot about the children that are missing from school. Bellwether says 3 million missing children. And that's a pretty scary statistic.
Yeah.
But actually, that's only 5% of school children. So, really, what they're saying is 95% of children have been in school throughout the pandemic.
Mm. See, so they're saying the scary number to kind of get people all riled up, and really it's not that. If you look at that percentage of that number, we've got kids in school right now with teachers and they are learning, and it's also in some cases you were saying deeper learning, narrowing, going into a positive learning experience for the kids. So how does that relate to Arizona?
Yeah, so in Arizona, we know that roughly 37,000 children have not been in school since the pandemic.
Okay.
That really means, let me restate that 97% of children in Arizona have been in school throughout the pandemic.
Okay.
And and I mean, I think it's important to note that those aspirational learners, those 3% that are going to aspire to re-enter our educational community in the fall, those are super important learners. But
Right.
we really need to understand the scope without all those scary numbers.
Okay, I love that. I love that you put those numbers into a perspective because they do sound scary when you see them flashing on you're scrolling through your social media, or you see them, flashing across a news banner, and you're like, oh, 3 million kids, what, or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, no, that's only 5%. So that does really, really help clarify. So in your research, when you question students and teachers, in your surveys and interviews about how they actually felt when they heard the term learning loss, you got words like frustrated and angry and sad. It seemed to be the top three that popped up. Can you share some of the feedback you received from the students with us first? Even though those also, we did have some that became languished, and I also kind of explained why. So we had students who had positive experiences, but we've also had students that maybe didn't. But really, when the students hear that term learning loss, it doesn't have a positive connotation with them because they really do feel like they've been learning, right?
Absolutely. One of the biggest frustrations is that that phrase being used over and over, students feel is discounting all of the significant work that they've been putting in throughout this entire time. If I can share Karina's exact words, Karina said, students have been learning about new things and their brain is growing each day. And parents don't have anything to worry about. They just have to know students learn every day.
Right. And people learn every day,
Right?
right?
Um,
So,
I,
yeah.
I talked to a teenager who said, I think I've grown more than I want to admit and more than I think. I've grown to take more responsibility and have learned way more technology than I knew before. This school year was more helpful than we want to think.
See, and I think that's true for a lot of students. I mean, it's been hard and it's been up and down for them, but they've had to kind of learn to self regulate. And if they don't do self regulation well, they're also learning that too, which is a valuable skill to know when, hey, this is not something I'm great at. I need to be trained up on that a little bit.
Absolutely. But I also want to be clear, like, not every student has felt successful through the pandemic. One of the consistent messages that I heard from teens was, I used to be an A student. Now I don't know who I am. I'm not sure that I'm ready for life, but I'm also not sure I'm ready for college either. Um, Darren said it really nicely when he said, I've been struggling with work and grades, and it's been hard to stay focused.
See, and I bet that's really confusing, especially when we really focus on grades in the educational system. And, when they are not really physically seeing papers turned in or getting papers back, even though they might be getting some feedback digitally, it might not be the same as when a teacher can, have a conference with the student, explain their grades and explain, hey, here's how you're doing right now in class, to feel like they are ready to move on. I can see that. I can see how that would be hard, just to know where you're at in a class or in apparently in life for these kids. Like they're a little bit, they need some floaties, right? We got to get them through this.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's super important to remember that the trauma that students have experienced is easily one of the greatest traumas in their life. And
Yeah.
they lack the coping skills and strategies and support structures that we have as adults. So, I mean, we can see the issues that they're facing from a very science perspective. Um, they have all of these inputs coming in, and this trauma has created filters that is making it really challenging for those inputs to actually stick in memory.
Okay.
So if I can get a little sciencey for you for a minute.
I love it. I love it so much. Can we talk about the brain and have folks who aren't driving listening to this maybe fold their hand into a fist and put the thumb underneath, and that way they can kind of see that's how the brain would look. And that way, when you're talking about these filters, we know that they're going in through the first four fingers, right? Is the
Mhm.
frontal cortex, and then maybe the back of their hand, right? Okay. That way they can kind of, see, have a mental picture. And then obviously, if you don't mind, I'm going to have your slides linked in the show notes of this science portion so they can also see that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
So
perfect.
yeah, so when you have that fist made,
Yeah.
anything, any input, any information that's attached to prior knowledge, to memory, it's all going to be filtered by that prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's only one thing that gets in the way of moving those inputs into our memory, and that's a stress filter.
Hmm.
And that stress filter really impacts motivation, self confidence, and anxiety.
Yeah, so I always tell my own children, and also when I teach like a neuroscience class here with brain and research relevance, that's like flipping their lid. Like if you take your fist and those four fingers that everything's supposed to go through, has a stress into it impacts it, all of your stress is in it, your lid is flipped. So those four fingers fly up and now all that's exposed is your thumb, right? Which is all your emotions, which is why it impacts motivation, their self-confidence and anxiety. So we have to decrease it, right? To get that lid back down for the kids, so they can actually take in the information.
Absolutely. And that's such an important and really simple way to understand it.
That's what I feel. I was like, this is the easiest way I can explain it. So
Yeah. So it's also important to realize that if we go through prior knowledge and memory, we only have that one filter.
yeah.
If we're teaching them something super new, it gets processed in the hippocampus, and the hippocampus doesn't have one filter; it has three filters.
Oh my gosh. So, and that would be located right towards the back, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
So
that's
we're
it.
not going to the prefrontal cortex. We're going back kind of where they're seeing their base of their hand, the top of their hand. Okay. So
Yeah, and so when we think about that area, right, there are three filters that we have to get through in order for the information we're trying to help our scholars learn to actually stick in long-term memory. And the first filter is, does it have meaning? So the learner actually has to attach some sort of meaning to this information, and then it gets moved to the immediate memory. Once it's in our immediate memory, then they have to answer the question, does it have any value to me at all beyond a good grade? And so if they can attach any value at all, then it moves to the working memory. And once it's in the working memory, we can really play with it. We can build on it, attach it to other things we do understand. But in order for it to move to long-term memory, it has to hit the third filter, which is this important to me? And so it's going to be more important than ever for us as teachers to help our learners answer all three of those questions to move through those filters.
yeah, so it's really about making sure that we keep that low stress in our classrooms and having that environment of it's okay to fail, it's okay to be frustrated, it's okay to not understand these things because it's new learning. But we also need to make a point at when we're teaching something to keep those three questions in mind so that way we're moving back to that hippocampus, right? And get it through immediate memory to working memory to long-term memory. I also like that you're talking about doesn't have value beyond the grade. And I think that's where you said Darren and other kids that you were talking with have that consistent message of, I used to be an A student or I was a B student. Like they identified with the grade they had and not necessarily the skills and content they were learning. And so we have to make the value more than just the grade. And then I think it naturally will become more important if we find a way to do that for the kids.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be really crucial, especially since they aren't identifying anymore with those grades, and largely because of languishing.
Yeah, and let's talk more about languishing because I've heard this term be used within other podcasts I'm listening to, but also just because of the distance learning, hybrid learning situation. So can you kind of define languishing and then kind of talk us through that a little bit about those kids that are feeling that way right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, languishing is a lot different than depression. With depression, we think about a feeling of hopelessness, right? With languishing, it's not that they don't have hope, it's that they feel like they're moving through a cloud and everything is dulled. The inputs are dulled. And so they're just, there's nothing exciting, there's no joy for them in the situation. They're just trying to make it from one thing to the next. Pablo said it really well. He said, my peers and I, we do not smile. We don't look up. We're just whipped mules led to a work site. And you adults tell us that the grass is greener, but that's just another work site.
Oh, Pablo, my heart. Oh.
But, and it's hard to hear Pablo say something like that, but it's super important for us to understand where they're coming from.
Absolutely.
Cami is a middle school student, and she was sharing that she keeps getting called lazy because she's languishing, and so her motivation is just incredibly suffering. And she says, Miss, I'm not lazy. I'm a car with an empty gas tank. And my parents keep telling me, oh, just turn this in or just turn that in and your grade will go up. And she said, but that's like telling a car, just get to the next city and then you can fill up with gas. But my tank is empty.
So I can't even move. She's just feeling completely just frozen by the sheer amount of work or just feeling, and the trauma of the time and not seeing her peers. And oh man, yeah, I mean, I could see that. I mean, I think a lot of adults are feeling that way as well. Like a lot of adults are languishing through this, these last 2 years.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. We've been languishing, but our teenagers are languishing even more because they don't have the same support structures and coping mechanisms that we have.
Yeah, and I mean, even teachers, it's kind of like as soon as they get used to something this year, it changes, right? And then they get used to something else and it changes. And I think everybody's tanks feel pretty empty. And so, I get where that they're coming from for sure.
Absolutely. And I mean, I would absolutely share that teachers have really been frustrated throughout this time. Like you talked about, things keep changing, right? And then here they are working harder than they ever have their entire career. And then they hear these words, learning loss.
Yeah, and that just makes me cringe because I know you heard and surveyed from teachers as well, so we can move from students to teachers. But I feel like when we say learning loss, we're discounting everything our teachers have done for our students this year. And it makes me also feel like we're highlighting student weakness and teacher weakness when we really should be shining a light on all their strengths. Because like you said, I think this year, though it's been extremely difficult and it has been changing, they have had to adapt their curriculums, their ways of teaching, their own teaching presence, going from being in a room to maybe in front of a screen. I mean, there's just so much. What did the teachers have to say about this year? Tell me the good and tell me the bad.
I think the teachers' voices have been incredibly strong through the surveys that I sent out. I want to share one of these statements with you. It's just incredible about what teachers have been learning and doing through this time. So CB tells us we have learned that we all learn differently. Along the way, we've also learned some math skills. Virtual manipulatives are not the same, but we learned how to use them to count or discover a fraction or design a numberless word problem. We learned how to communicate through a screen, through masks, through Google Meets. We learned that learning takes on many forms, and our flexibility, our drive, our perseverance is what will take us into the next challenge, the next thing we need to learn.
Okay, and my favorite thing, and I highlighted this when I was reading through some of those survey comments that you sent me earlier. I was like, learning takes on many forms. Like that needs to be on something because, like a sticker or I don't know, something, because I think we are getting to a point where learning is not just defined as a classroom with four walls and a teacher standing up in front of the room anymore. That image needs to be completely shattered, and that learning can take on so many different forms for kids, for teachers, and it will still happen. Learning will still happen. Those standards will still get taught. Those skills will still be mastered. And as long as we kind of persevere and be flexible and kind of also get kind of re-inspired, I think we can shatter that image of stand in front of the room and lecture, because I think this year has taught us that they can do it.
Yeah, I asked teachers what some of their bravest moves were this year.
Oh yeah.
And I heard this statement over and over and over. I've spent less class time talking and more class time letting students talk.
Oh my gosh, can I get an amen? Woo! I love that because that's what we want, right? We want the kids talking about the content and what they're learning, and the teachers just being available for feedback and redirection or whatever they need to be more available for. So that's awesome.
Right. A secondary teacher kind of went even further and started thinking about exams and assessment in a different way.
Mm.
So they wrote, instead of writing traditional final exams in December, I wrote a menu of tasks that students could complete to demonstrate their understanding from the semester. This created a more authentic assessment, generated a lot less stress for the students, and gave them a chance to choose tasks they could show their understanding with, rather than having the teacher choose questions that might not show off their learning the best way.
Oh man, that's amazing because not all students are standardized, right? We've heard that quote before. Why do we give these standardized tests when students aren't standardized people? None of us are. And so for them to have some choice, it probably did give them a little less stress. And then it's authentic. They're able to really demonstrate what they know and what they've learned because they feel confident about the way in which they can demonstrate that knowledge. So that's awesome. That is a brave
Yeah,
move.
it's a great way to disrupt languishing.
Yes. Oh, that's true. Yeah. Because as soon as they get that choice, right, then they're like, okay, yeah, I can do this. I can do X, Y, and Z and still be successful in this module or this unit or whatever. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
But to be clear, even though there were a lot of brave moves and teachers really had a lot of positive things to say, it wasn't all roses, right? Teachers have never felt less appreciated and more bullied than they do now. And many have really felt that Teacher Appreciation Week was hollow and just very quiet in comparison to the past. They've had to really teach in difficult situations with little to no time to prepare or acclimate. And so I heard about the hybrid situation that teachers have taught in. I heard a lot from them. Ella says it best. She said, hybrid has also split my class into roomies and zoomies. And we no longer have the wonderful whole group discourses we used to have.
Yeah. And honestly, I can't even imagine what these teachers that have been doing the roomies and zoomies they're magicians to me. Like, I don't know how they've been doing that, because that has to be probably one of the most stressful things, is trying to keep that all organized and together, and not having the languishing, and making sure you're trying to still connect with kids. And oh my gosh, I mean, that should just go away. Needs to, I can see how that would just be completely disheartening in a way if you just no longer had that whole group. It's kind of like either one way or the other. The hybrid thing is really difficult.
It is. I mean, there are great college professors that have incredible technologically advanced rooms for this, and they're successful, but that wasn't what we gave our teachers.
Right.
We didn't change their room at all, and then we said, here, figure this out.
Right. And I feel like that's what it's been. It's been the year of here, figure this out. And it's like, okay, well, but with what? Like, and teachers are the most resourceful people I know. I mean, them and nurses, I feel like they just like can do, things on the fly. But at some point, we only have so much to give in a day. And I think that's why teachers, and even this appreciation week that just passed, felt hollow, because it just, we always go in wanting to do our best. And I think that's put a toll on a lot of teachers, because, they feel like they haven't been able to do their best. And so then to not really have like a stellar teacher appreciation week, that doesn't help, I don't think, with any of the morale of teachers. But again, that's kind of why I wanted to end with this, because and with you and your research, because teachers and students are seeing this term learning loss, and it's freaking them out. And from your research, it's really not something you need to be freaking out about.
Absolutely. Our students are super afraid that this idea of learning loss is real, and they worry about returning to school and not remembering what they've learned. And so my response is, and what I hope all of our responses is, you are where you're supposed to be. And from here, we move forward together.
I love that. And I really hope that teachers can take a breath right now and think about, next year as we all are where we're supposed to be. Kids, teachers, parents, no one is winning at the pandemic life. Like, there's no, there's no winning anywhere from what I've seen. So here we are. Let's figure out where we're at, and then let's just move forward together. And I'm hoping next year, so maybe they can get back to a little bit of normal. But I also do want to encourage teachers, after they've had some rest and recovery, that, I know we say new normal all the time, but there has been some major amazing things that they've done this year that I don't want them to lose sight of. Maybe they can dive a little bit into blended learning. Maybe they can do a flipped classroom. Like, they have some skills that they didn't have before. And so do the kids. So I really do think that learning loss needs to be out of their head, and we need to move into, okay, let's just figure out where we're at. Let's get all the learning that we have done, because we have learned a lot. There hasn't been that much learning loss. And we've learned a whole new set of skills. And let's go. Let's move forward. Let's do this. And just get reinvigorated and re-inspired by that, and not put down so much by that term of learning loss.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Corwin Publishing put out a newsletter, and I'm going to share this in the show notes, but it was called Reinvesting and Rebounding with students next year, in order to welcome students back. So not with a testing regime. Okay, we don't want to like hand out a quiz and be like, let's see where everybody is, because I don't think that's going to set the right tone. In my opinion, I don't know where you're at, where they are, but I feel like they're just going to be like, let's just see how far behind you really are. Like, I don't think that's going to set the right tone.
Telling a bunch of learners that they have gaps is just asking for them to feel disenfranchised with all of their education.
Yeah, and their self-concept of as a learner is gonna plummet if it hasn't already. So we need to be like you said, you're where you're supposed to be. I'm so happy you're here, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's like figure out where we're at, and I think that needs to come through not necessarily these bubble tests, see how far behind you are, but with strategies that engage and connect and honestly raise the level of difficulty for students with topics that the students, are passionate about. I think we can challenge students coming back. I think we can do the opposite. And then by doing that, I think they're going to be excited to be back in school and also be proud of what they do know and what they do remember. So in the newsletter, they reference reciprocal teaching as a way of accelerating learning after COVID-19. Can you speak to what this strategy is, and then how can it empower students to own where they're at in the learning process? So meet them where they're at, and then while they're also then learning from each other and where everybody else is coming from after this experience of being either hybrid or remote or in person or whatever their learning was this past year and a half.
Yeah, Britt, I'm glad you picked reciprocal teaching to talk about because this is going to meet a lot of our learners' needs at one time. So just to be clear, reciprocal teaching is when students work in groups to teach each other using 4 steps: summarize, question, clarify, and predict. So in groups, students are going to summarize their understanding of the concept, and then the others in the group can ask questions. The student who's summarizing then can clarify the concepts as well as other members of the team. And together, the team starts to make predictions, what if scenarios. I think this is going to be a really powerful tool to support learners to acknowledge that they actually do know and can teach each other. But then also, our learners have been, some of them have been really isolated through this time, and their social skills have decreased. By incorporating reciprocal teaching, students can learn from each other, filling in each other's blanks, and we as teachers will be supporting their social skill development in a positive and supportive environment.
Yeah, and one of the ways that we have taught reciprocal teaching is just giving a group of 4 some poster paper and just folding it into 4 squares so that each student kind of has a square that they can summarize their understanding and kind of like have their own little note section. And then that way, when they are presenting to other members of their group, so they kind of do that silently at first and kind of individually kind of like brain dump into their square. Then when they are going through and discussing, they can add to their square of what their peers have said. So it's like, it's not about like your square has to be right. It's what do you know, and what questions do you have, or what things are making you nervous about this subject or this topic or this skill or this whatever. And then the kids can go around and talk, and they can add to their square, right? And then it kind of can become this thing we put up at the beginning of the year on our walls, like this is where our learning is starting, here are our learning points. And then a teacher can easily look at 8 posters as opposed to grading 35 quizzes, and really look at, okay, here's where we're at with these skills, and here's where my students were struggling, where they needed clarifying questions. Here are some predictions they were making or what if scenarios. And so you can also provide feedback and go around to those posters. And I think sometimes, when we give them markers and we give them poster paper, no matter what age you're at, and they're able to kind of just get it out and talk and have those social skills, we're hitting a lot of different, higher level, high yield strategies with just one reciprocal teaching strategy. So I thought that was a good one to start off the year with, and that way they're feeling like their voice is valued, their voice, not necessarily what they can bubble in on a sheet, but like their, what they've learned is valued in the classroom.
Right. It's asset focused. So we're already starting with the assumption that you have assets that are worth sharing with your peers.
Right. Yep. And I mean, if students went through and summarized questions, clarified and predicted, and then, kind of just, it's okay. And teachers need to be like, it's okay if you don't have a prediction. It's okay because you know what we're going to share in a little bit, and maybe your peer is going to have something, and you can add that to yours, and that might spark something else in your mind, which then you can add to yours as well. Like, giving them those opportunities to say, I want to know where you guys are at. And so let's have these discussions as we move through these new skills and standards that we're going to be learning this year. And I think that will help the kids not feel as, like, oh, I'm so far behind, or oh my gosh, I gotta get back into this. It'll ease them in a little bit. And like you said, really help fill in the blanks as far as not only their knowledge, but their social skills and their development that way. Okay, so we have rapid fire questions. I don't know if you would be ready for them, but I like to ask them at the end because I love to hear what every guest's answer is. I just think it's fascinating. So I'm going to ask you some questions and just kind of come with whatever pops into your mind, okay?
Okay, we'll give this a try.
All right. Education is fill in the blank.
Education is our hope for a just world.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is. It is a hope for a just world, for sure. Oh my gosh, that was awesome. If you could pass on any wisdom to your students, what would you share?
We talked about this earlier. They need a better definition of success than what the media tells them or than what grades tell them or what others say. Like, it's got to be way beyond money and objects. And it can't rely on validation by others. I would say that that would be wisdom. And then maybe if I can add one more thing.
Sure.
What I want students to know is if someone says something can't be done, that just means they can't do it. It doesn't mean you can't.
Oh my gosh, say that again.
Okay, let me think what I said. Okay, if someone says something can't be done, that just means they can't do it. It doesn't mean you can't do it.
Man, I want that on my laptop screen because that's so true. Just because they can't do it doesn't mean you can't. Yeah, I mean, and prove them wrong, right? Go out and prove them wrong. I think that's awesome. And I also agree with you. We've got to figure out a way for students to see success differently. And I don't know how that's going to happen necessarily. Like, it floats in my mind all the time because I don't want teachers and students to always feel like success has to be a grade. Even when I was in the classroom, I was like, I don't really care about your grades. And they would look at me and I'm like, I'm sorry, it's not in like that. And I don't mean it in that way. I know you need grades to get into college and I know that they're important to you, but I need to know if you're learning. I need to know if you're getting these skills and you're mastering them. And I guess I can assign a grade to that, but sometimes like it's just so fluid, student by student. And so it was so hard for me as a teacher. So yeah, we've got to figure that out. I don't know, Melissa, brainstorm that over the summer and get back to me. Okay. Okay. Next question. What inspires you?
Oh, after these surveys, I'm going to say brave moves inspire me. Teachers changing their classrooms and their schools, students changing their communities, brave moves inspire me.
I love it. I love that you call them brave moves. I hope that the teachers listening or the administrators listening in on this podcast think about their next school year with brave moves intended. Sometimes we have to make some brave moves and it leads to really, really great things. And it's okay to trip and fall as we go through that. But that's why they're brave, right? It takes courage to take risks, but they pay off in dividends sometimes. And I think what better time to do that than right now when everything's been tossed up in the air anyway. So
absolutely. Okay. We've got to scrape up our knees and elbows, but in the process of doing that, we can leap huge boulders.
Oh, look at seriously, you were like spouting out wisdom that I just need to be like jotting down on paper just for myself. Okay, I love it. All right, so now we're gonna get a little silly. What are your must-have smartphone apps?
Okay, well, I super love hiking and I get lost a lot, so the All Trails app is important to me. Um, COVID Watch app is a necessity, right? And then I'm a high school math teacher at heart, so Desmos.
Oh,
Um,
I don't
you
know
know,
that. This is the English teacher in me is like, what? What is, okay, and I'll put it in the show notes too. Desmos, what does it do? Because all the math teachers are now going to be like, what?
Yeah, so Desmos is an incredibly flexible graphing and calculator technology. So it puts in the students' hands the ability to run all the what ifs that they can ask in their brain um, with little tiny moves of the mouse, essentially, and really discover the math, the exciting math inside of these concepts.
Oh, you should be a spokesperson for that because now I want to download it. Okay. Remind you is what you said as well.
Yeah, you've got to have Remind because that's how I communicate with my scholars, and I give them messages, reminding them about projects coming up and quizzes and tests. And, it's also a way that I can communicate with parents.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that because I think Remind for me was really more powerful for when I was teaching high school. The parents and the students. The students I felt like I saw every day. I'm like, if you don't know what's going on, like your scholars, you don't see them every day. But like for me, I was like, I have communicated with you in so many different ways, especially because Google Classroom would give them alerts and things like that. But when I, with parent permission, obviously took a picture of a kid presenting, and I knew they were nervous, but they were doing a great job, and sent it to that parent in the middle, like just to that one parent, and into the middle of that, and said, she's doing great. Look at her; she's up there doing it. And that parent got that at work. They were like, oh my gosh, like it just was. I was able to quickly with my phone give feedback about certain kids really, really fast. And I felt like then when something did need to be addressed, like my parent communication was really a lot easier for me. So yeah, that's what I used Remind for. But oh my gosh. Okay, what else?
Well, obviously, Discord and other social media apps. YouTube is incredibly powerful. It teaches me all the time. And I can't live without a digital wallet app.
Oh my gosh, I don't have one of those. Do you just put your cards in it?
So I use Samsung Pay because I have a Samsung phone. And so, yeah, I just put my gift cards in, my debit card, whatever, and I can have my phone with me and pay for whatever I need to.
Oh, well, that's brilliant. Okay, I need to look that up. All right, and then here's the last question. What song do you know all the lyrics to?
Oh my gosh, 100%. It's a Beatles song. It's called In My Life.
Oh my gosh, yes! I love the Beatles. Okay, all right. If listeners want to learn more from you, where can they find you online?
Okay, so we are at crr.math, M-A-T-H, .arizona, spell the whole word out, .edu.
Okay. And they can reach out to you that way. Your email, I'm assuming, is probably on that site.
It is.
It's you. Okay, perfect. Oh, thank you so much, Melissa, for coming on and just debunking, first of all, this myth of learning loss with current real science research that's can just let teachers and students breathe, but I also give them credit for all the things they have been learning. I so appreciate you coming on there and just, sharing some of your research, your surveys, the voices of students and teachers, whether it was the good, the bad, or the ugly.
Thank you so much, Brit. This was such a great conversation, and thank you to all of your audience for educating our youth.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Learning Unlocked and finding out that you can just completely not buy into this myth of learning loss and the scary numbers that the media has been putting out to surround it. Instead of doing that, I hope that you've thought about maybe reflecting more on all that you have learned, all that has been learned by your students and by you as an educator. But before you reflect, I really hope you take some time and just rest. I want you to take out your phone right now and look at your summer and find, even if it's just a week, where you can just rest and recover from this school year and not think about teaching at all. And then I hope you take some time to just reconnect in your relationships. I know this year has been really hard on relationships for everyone, and I think we can rest and recover and reconnect with each other. And because if you come back to school not rested, you're not going to be reinvigorated. You're not going to feel ready. And so when you are ready and you reflect back, note that it is not loss. The school year was not a loss. It was a complete reimagining of learning, of classroom management, of grading systems, of instructional plans and processes. And my hope for you, and as we go into season 3 next school year in August, that you take some time as we go back to the school year and reimagine. And have fun reimagining what a classroom with your new skills and your new abilities could look like. If you have listened today as a GPS educator, you can receive PD recertification credit by visiting our Employee Hub page and navigating to professional growth and then digital PD courses. Just a reminder that we are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at GPS Prof Growth. That's at GPS PROF GROWTH. For more information or resources from this episode, so the brain stuff that we were talking about, the article, oh my gosh, all the research, please visit our website. So it's at learningunlocked altogether .libsyn.com/website, and Libsyn is spelled LIBSYN. We are distributed by Libsyn to Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Audible. Episodes are also available on our PGD YouTube channel under playlists. Our intro and outro music are licensed from Melody Loops. Thanks again, key holders. You are the keys. Keep unlocking curiosity, creativity, and innovation within your students. But first, take some time for yourself and have a wonderful summer. Stay kind and courageous, and I'll see you for season 3.